I got a call from Guru Maharaj.
So, you're not getting flowers for the deities? Then I said that yes, Guru Maharaj, because everyone is afraid to go out and lock down. Then no, we need to take care of the deities and they must look beautiful. So, in Ujjain, what I have done, I have made silk made flowers. So, you make flowers with silk and offer it to Radha Govinda and Jagannath, and you send me a picture. Then he said, what about the milk? Are you getting milk or not? What about their sweet rice and sandesh? Just imagine a person who is guru of thousand and thousand of disciples and so much service as GBC, zonal secretaries and so many things. But he is having this nature which is actually from the teachings of Rup Sanatan. Attention to detail is a sign of love. And he is calling and asking that whether milk products and everything you are offering to the deities or not. Then I said that, well, we don't have sweets, Guru Maharaj, because we don't have milk. Then he said that buy dry milk powder and make sandesh of that. So I was just thinking how much love one person must have in his heart that he is so intricately trying to serve the deities, sitting in Ujjain, thinking about Calcutta and the deities. Because he is an ideal personality who loved Srila Prabhupada, who understood the heart of Prabhupada, and in that way he is serving. Guru Maharaj ki. We have among us Her Grace Vishakha Mataji. Now she will be offering her prayers to Guru Maharaj.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskya Tadesha Tarane. The first time that I took note of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami was November 14th, 1977. About 2 p.m. on that afternoon, the ladies were taking prasad in the prasadam area of the Krishna Balaram temple when word came from Srila Prabhupada's Ayurvedic doctor that Srila Prabhupada had only 4 or 5 more hours left with us. We immediately prepared ourselves and entered Srila Prabhupada's large darshan room where he was lying emaciated on his departure bed. The room was quickly filling up with emotional, bereft devotees who surrounded Srila Prabhupada's bed, plaintively chanting Hare Krishna with the feeling of, as Srila Prabhupada famously said, a child crying for his mother. The mood was desperate and raw, with a pervasive sense of vulnerability and emptiness, confusion and devastation. My husband Yadubara Prabhu was filming, and I was photographing. These services required us to restrain our emotions, at least for the time being, so we could observe and record. As I surveyed the intense scene, I noticed Bhakti Charu Swami. He hadn't shaved for some days, and stationed at the head of Srila Prabhupada's bed, was leaning over the low bedboard and looking down on Srila Prabhupada's head directly below him. In Bhakti Charu Swami's hand was a 2-inch silver lota with a tiny silver spout. Periodically, Maharaja would pour a few drops of water from that lota into Srila Prabhupada's mouth. For Bhakti Charu Swami, there was no one in that crowded room except Srila Prabhupada and him. He was oblivious to the swell of Vaishnavas around him and the surging emotions that saturated the room. Rather, he had his own emotion, one of utter dedication to and concentration on his service, one of complete concern for Srila Prabhupada's adequate hydration. Observing Bhakti True Swami, I was drawn into his sphere of focus, and for me it began to represent something much larger, the relationship each one of us has with Srila Prabhupada. Regardless of what anyone else is doing or not doing, each one of us has an individual relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Each one of us has a sacred service to offer to Srila Prabhupada, however small or large that service. If it's done with sincerity, we may be certain that Srila Prabhupada values and accepts it, that it's important to him. If we have to sacrifice for that service, so be it. That sacrifice is sacred and will help us advance spiritually. What especially inspired me was that throughout the decades that followed Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, Bhakti True Swami remained focused on pleasing Srila Prabhupada. By his words and behavior, Bhakti True Swami consistently strove to keep Prabhupada in the center of his life, in the center of the lives of his followers, and in the center of ISKCON. And that, without a doubt, is exactly where Srila Prabhupada belongs. All glories to His Holiness Bhakti True Swami. Hare Krishna.
Now we will have the homages by different sannyasis. We will start with His Holiness Sachinandan Swami Maharaj.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Parastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Satarine Vanshakal Tataru Vaishya Kripasinuvaya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. It is my great honor to share some of the wonderful qualities of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj with all of you. And it is my hope that I will be able to inspire you to keep his memory alive and to keep on following his unique example and also teachings. The easiest way for me to describe Bhakti Charu Maharaj to all of you is with this picture. It is the picture which he chose to illustrate his book, The Ocean of Mercy. You can see on this picture Srila Prabhupada and him like a small little boy who is led by Srila Prabhupada to Vrindavan Dham. You do not find any other person in this picture. Not a big crowd, not a big assembly of other devotees, only Prabhupada and him. Maharaj describes that when he was only 7 years old, his mother died. She had been isolated from the family because of an infectious disease, and the relatives all came in the room after she had departed. There were flowers, bouquets, and so on, and Maharaj, as a little boy, depended on his mother, who had told him about Ram and Krishna and the proper way of behavior, was now standing before his deceased mother. Then he went down to the room, and there the situation came over him. He could realize that he would never see his mother again. And he said that this had permanently changed him, he had never forgotten that. It had permanently altered his life. When he was old enough, he traveled the world in order to search for God, where he would find shelter. And after asking a few saints for directions, he eventually first met Prabhupada through the book Nectar of Devotion, and then he met him in person and surrendered to him. For Maharaj, although he was so absolutely knowledgeable, he was so well educated, he was such a gentleman who could mix with all levels of societies. He was a scientist and a singer and a preacher and a cook, everything. But his outstanding quality for me always was that he took exclusive shelter in Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. Perhaps when he saw as a young boy the temporary existence where death can take away his mother, he was impacted already then, because a transcendentalist is not born in one day. There are many things which happen before, sometimes in other lives. And he always struck me, although being so talented, so interested. He made movies, and we all know he built a temple in 1 year. We all know of his achievements, but his greatest outstanding quality is his exclusive shelter. When he joined Srila Prabhupada, he was given the name Chira Chola Gopinath, and he became immediately Prabhupada's secretary. He took with fervor to translating Srila Prabhupada's books and had a lot of association with Srila Prabhupada. You must know, he was really immediately in the inner circle around Srila Prabhupada, and very dear to his divine grace. Srila Prabhupada, before leaving, told him to not get involved with a woman, to not marry, to remain a sannyasi, and he kept that divine instruction with him, because Maharaj, and that is so important for me to say, was a person who had found exclusive shelter. We all know how much he preached to the ISKCON society that the first and foremost principle of all what we would do is to take shelter in Prabhupada's lotus feet. And he talked very often with me about it from very different perspectives, where I could really see this person has absolutely taken shelter. I first met Bhakti Charu Maharaj. I believe he was still brahmachari at that time. I'm not so sure, but it was in Mayapur. I was coming from the Prasadam hall, I believe, and I was going to the long building, and all of a sudden I heard someone talking in not just in German, but in Hamburg German. That's a certain accent. Hallo Alter. So he was addressing me, and I looked around and only saw a very cultured personality who was smiling at me, and then did you just address me? And he nodded his head, and immediately he took me into his room, and we spent many hours discussing Krishna consciousness. And I invited him at that time to come to Germany, and he came, and we spent many years together, year after year, traveling. I think we were a minimum of 1 or 2 months together each year. What I noted in that phase was, first of all, he always would ask me, what should I lecture about when we were in the temples? And I said, Maharaj, tell us about Gopkumar. And year after year, before any other devotee knew about the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he would talk about the journey of Gopkumar back home, back to Godhead, the different stations which he took, the different things he learned, and gladdened our hearts. For the outside world, he was talking about science, sometimes about Christianity, Jesus' teachings. He would be making the perfect bridge to the outside people, and of course then going to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. He was so much liked in Germany that when the Christians had their yearly gathering, millions of people come together at the gathering. One professor invited him to come. He had not invited any other German preacher. Maharaj was invited, and he gave a beautiful lecture where he spoke about the evolution of consciousness to God consciousness in such a wonderful, scientific and convincing way that all those who were there and who later listened to the lectures, it was printed also, were totally overwhelmed. His intelligence and his beautiful heart were, in other words, so convincing that even the Christians who, especially on that day when they all come together to glorify Jesus, tend to be a little, I don't want to say closed, but something like that. No, Maharaj won their heart in a storm. We were also going to the German-speaking countries here in Europe, Switzerland and Austria, and gave one public program after the other. And I still remember when we traveled, Maharaj would come to me a day before and he would say, so Sachinanda Maharaj, I want to sing a new song. What do you think about this song? And then he knows so many songs, our philosophy so well. Then he started to sing Yodi Gora no Hoito Tobo Ki Hoito Kemone Dorito De, much more beautiful. And he would tell us the translation with so much relish. He would say, if Lord Gaura had not appeared as the Yoga avatar in this age of Kali, then what would have become of us? How could we have tolerated living? Who in this universe would have ever learned about the topmost limits of loving mellows that comprised the glory of Sri Radha? Each tour which we had, he came and said, let us sing this song, and then he would introduce a new song, and I always kept on thinking, he knows so much. but never, ever did his knowledge bring him to any other conclusion than Prabhupada has given the process whereby which we can go back home, back to Godhead. He was very, very keen, just like we saw in his in the original picture. Once, Bhurijan Prabhu said, when he referred to this picture, or when he showed this picture, I'm sorry, yeah, here it is. Bhurijan Prabhu said, I think you have shown us your heart. And Maharaj said, yes, nothing more. Yes, this is the heart. In one of his Vyasa Puja offerings to Srila Prabhupada, he describes a lamentation. He said that really, Prabhupada, I only want to join you. It was after he had finished the temple in Ujjain as his loving offering to Srila Prabhupada. He said, he gave an example. You are like a loving mother who stands behind the curtain calling her child, come, come, come. And as the child responds to the call of his mother, he learns to walk on his own. And walking, he moves towards the mother. Maharaj always felt the calling of Srila Prabhupada, and his heart was aching for Srila Prabhupada's service. He was, when we talked, always very clear about it. He had no plans for this world. He wanted to serve his eternal master. So when he left in such an unexpected way, we of course cried, and we couldn't believe it that he had left us. It was very difficult, but in the back of my mind I always remembered that he had now walked and found Srila Prabhupada behind the curtain, and he's most probably very, very happy now. We should not allow Bhakti Charu Maharaj to leave us, however. He is one of these devotees who is a very dear servant of Srila Prabhupada and of Krishna. And we should see how we can remain mindful of him. And that is particularly done by following his example and by also becoming familiar with his particular teachings, his particular contribution, his particular perspective, which he has really described in many, many lectures. And by remaining mindful of him in these two ways, following the example and understanding the teachings, he will continue to live on in our hearts, and what would please him will happen, and that is that we also will start to walk towards that curtain from where he is gently calling us, move on, move on. This world is a temporary place but there is an eternal home where we all, in some ways, which is inconceivable perhaps at this stage, will be meeting together at the lotus feet of Prabhupada and Krishna. It's so important, these two things, understanding his example and understanding his particular teachings, that also the grief which is always there when we remember him will not be so big. Today, in the morning, my assistant and servant was very joyful. He knows Maharaj very well. Maharaj had taken care of him when he was a little child, and he came to me and he said, I dreamt of Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He was at the gate to the garden, and you came out and I came out with you. It means my assistant and myself came towards Maharaj, and Maharaj said, let us go and travel. Like he always said when he was in Germany, let us go and travel. And I think this is an open invitation to all of us. Let us go and move forward in Krishna consciousness, and in this way follow in the footsteps of Maharaj. Thank you very much. All the best. Bhakti Charu Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo.
Sachinandan Swami Maharaj. Just to mention that we are also preparing for the evening kirtan. There will be a spectacular darshan of the Samadhi with something surprising, which I am not going to reveal. When all of you will be seeing, you will be witnessing this beautiful offering that the devotees are going to make. Even those who are online, they will be also getting this, so be with us. I was remembering that today morning, many devotees, senior devotees were telling that all the Samadhis have been decorated so beautifully with flowers, with Guru Maharaj Samadhi. And that signifies a very beautiful point, which many of the Prabhupada disciples were speaking to us. We are reunited, we are together, we need to stay together, and we all respect our spiritual uncles and spiritual aunties. And ISKCON, as a family we stand, which Guru Maharaj very much emphasizes. Today morning, I think some of the devotees who was giving their offering, they mentioned that every single devotee of ISKCON must see this and hear this lecture which Guru Maharaj gave. I also remember that this Bhakti Giti, Bengali book, which has all the bhajans of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, as Maharaj was mentioning. I remember once I was traveling with Guru Maharaj in one of our well-wishers' house in Calcutta, and then Guru Maharaj was holding one book, and he was telling, what is the purpose of this book? Then I said that because we don't remember like you, so we need to have this book, because otherwise if some lines we will miss. But no, this is actually preaching. Every evening we should go out and sing one bhajan to all the houses we are visiting and make them repeat that, and they will get the mercy of the Vaishnavas. And in this way he was inspiring all of us that every evening there must be some program where we can have this Bhakti Giti, Bhakti bhajans. Also Guru Maharaj mentioned that in Calcutta in 80s, a whole Sunday program, Sunday feast, he used to just sing one bhajan and he used to give a lecture on that bhajan. So I was just remembering all these things, and I know all of you, if you have given chance, you have an ocean of remembrance and sweet pastimes that you can share. Definitely Gurudev and Guru Maharaj is sitting in all of our heart. Hridesha Arjuna Tishtiti, as Krishna says, sits in our heart. Similarly, Dibya Gyan, Hriday Prakashita, Guru sits in our heart, and he understands. We can all offer our prayers to Guru Maharaj. Now we have another very dear god brother and friend and a brother. I remember in Ujjain, this personality came, and in one Vyasasana, both of them were sitting and holding their hands and looking at each other. And I'm just remembering that, and they were all smiling. They were not talking. And sometimes, and they both of them took Guru Puja together. And yes, you have rightly guessed, His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. He is going to speak now and blessing us. So let us hear from Maharaj.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Shatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya eva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Today we are celebrating the TIROBHAV, the disappearance day of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj is truly one of the greatest devotees of this world. His life is something of history. When he first came to our movement, our beloved Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, personally took him in as a confidential associate, as a dear son. Srila Prabhupada entrusted him with the translations of all of his books in Srila Prabhupada's own native language and that of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bengali. He also gave him the service of Srila Prabhupada's personal servant. How much Srila Prabhupada trusted the faith, the surrender, and the devotion of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada showered his mercy and blessings upon him. And Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, dedicated his life to sharing that mercy with all the devotees of our movement and with the whole world. As Srila Prabhupada signed his letter, your ever well-wisher, I believe very deeply that Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he imbibed this ever well-wishing spirit of Srila Prabhupada and dedicated his life to be an instrument of Srila Prabhupada's divine grace. In my own life, he was truly a best friend, a dearmost God brother, a person who was filled with such wisdom and compassion. He was a mentor for me. and always a well-wisher, always encouraging me, always seeking to empower me. And I know he was like this in his relationship with most all of his God brothers, God sisters, disciples and followers who knew him well. So gentle, so humble, yet so fearless, so powerful. His beautiful kirtans would melt our hearts. His classes would fill us with Lord Sri Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Prabhupada's mercy. How he developed the project in Ujjain. How he helped to develop the project in Mayapur Dham. How he developed the Abhay Charan television series that was viewed by tens and millions of people. He was the author of wonderful books. He's the embodiment of Vaishnava culture in how he prepared prasad and served prasad, and how he welcomed guests, and how he could make everyone feel that he was their best friend. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, at the time when Srila Prabhupada disappeared from this world, he was drowning in an ocean of separation. After all, his entire life within ISKCON was practically directly in Srila Prabhupada's association, offering personal service day and night. But in that mood of separation, he transformed. He transformed our movement and all of our devotees in so many ways, because he knew Srila Prabhupada's spirit so deeply. He personified, he embodied that spirit. The incredible devotional, compassionate accomplishments of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj in his service and separation of Srila Prabhupada is an example, a lesson, which so perfectly guides us on our journey in love and separation. I cannot express the feeling of void, of loss, when such a friend, such a well-wisher, such a representative of my beloved Guru Maharaj departed from this world. But I do know that he's with Srila Prabhupada, and together Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj are very much with all of us. I have had so many prayerful experiences in remembrance of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj that has given me great courage and hope even in difficult times. Yes, in our love and separation from Him, He is more present than ever in our hearts. It is for us to appreciate and recognize that. And it is for us to reciprocate with the sacrifice, surrender, in loving service that He offered to all of us. To the disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj and his followers, I congratulate you and I celebrate your incredible good fortune to have been touched by the mercy of such a Vaishnava. The Gaudiya Vaishnav Siddhanta, the Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition of loving devotional service, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and all our great acharyas taught, is embodied in the life, in the teachings, in the example of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And although we are all sharing together the profound and almost impossible feeling of loss in his disappearance, in that shared experience, we can feel him, and together we can strive to please him in a way that he emphasized in everything he did, to make the community of ISKCON a wonderful, happy place where devotees could truly find shelter in the love of Vrindavan as Srila Prabhupada has given us. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. Thank you very much.